been quite a journey for us over the last 3 weeks as we have been diving into How to Be Perfect by Michael Schur. We started very simply learning a little bit about some of the big 3 Western philosophies. We practiced a little bit of our moral philosophy, our moral muscles, if you will, to see how perfect maybe we were or weren't in certain situations. And now we come to the end, the final part of this 3-part book, where we are finally determining whether or not we are in fact perfect. Welcome to the Painted Porch. I am Amy Yakowski. I'm the CEO and founder of Painted Porch Strategies, and I'm here with my crackpot team, our mindfulness Sherpa and Chief Joy Officer, Sierra Ramcantrell, and our Master of Communication, Rob Hunter. Okay, Sierra, Rob. So far, we've been dipping our toes, getting a little bit deeper. Now we're probably a little about waist to chest deep in our moral philosophy training and starting to think about in what ways we can be better people doing more good and less bad. For this 3rd part, Michael starts by talking about the idea of a moral opportunity cost, basically saying that there is always an opportunity that we can be doing more good than we are. Essentially weighing, he uses an example, weighing whether or not you spend $800 on a signed Boston Red Sox autographed bat, or should you take that $800 and send it to starving children in Malawi? I thought this was an interesting section here, as most of them have been. I had some things that I probably bristled with or didn't quite agree with him on with it, because it always becomes a how can I do more? But where is that threshold to give up all of your worldly goods, all of the things that maybe, to quote Marie Kondo, would spark joy for you in order to be doing more good in the world? So I want to first ask, what were some of your initial takeaways when it comes to that moral opportunity cost?
Well, I like you, I bristled with some of the opinions in this book. Now, I feel like it is important to note that this is not meant to be an exhaustive tutorial on moral philosophy. This is a comedy writer for Hollywood and SNL that has written a book after doing research for a show that he created called The Good Place. And he found out all these interesting things and kind of went on a philosophy deep dive. But it should be noted that this is his opinion about these philosophies and some things. So that out of the way, I think it's important to understand that when you read somebody's opinion, that it's okay to bristle with it, and it's okay to maybe open your opinion up and maybe be like, nah, not for me. That is the power of choice. This is the dichotomy of control. I cannot control what this author thinks, and I might disagree or have other viewpoints, but we can do that, agree to disagree, and smile. I did have to put the book down a few times because I got all bristled up. Myself, I got bristly. I know, weird to think of the mindfulness Sherpa as bristly, but I got bristly. But there were some very interesting opinions and perspectives on a few of the moral things. And also it should be noticed that he kind of takes a take on things. So he gives you an example to kind of work with. A lot of this philosophy stuff is very esoteric, so you have to kind of give it like a teachable thing to it. But Rob, what did you think? What were some of your overall thoughts?
I think it's a miss. I think it's a big miss. Honestly, I don't remember any of the philosophy in the book. I don't remember the difference between utilitarianism and whatever else is in the book, because I remember the politics, because I remember how dismissive and judgmental he is in his approach. And you read all the comments on the back from all these famous actors, Amy Poehler, Ted Danson, who were in some of his shows, Mindy Kaling on the front. And you realize, at least to me, it appears that they all live in this bubble where to them being a good person ties into their political identity. And if you are not tied into that political identity, you must not be a good person, because I found it to be incredibly judgmental in that communication sense, which is a communication error we all have. But it was all on display to me in this book, because if you happen to be, for example, a Republican, this book you would get bristled by. You'd be like, what is this guy's opinion? Why is he slamming only Republicans as if Democrats never do anything bad? So that was my main issue with it, is because we were all bristled by it, it has the opposite intent. And to go back to the bat, it seemed to me that this is this author, Michael Schur's, attempt to feel good about his own beliefs and justify his behaviors in a philosophical sense. That, I think, is where it missed. And quite honestly, and I love Michael Schur, I love your shows, I love your work. I think you're supremely talented at what you do, but I didn't think the book was funny.
Yeah, but I will say, I think all of us, we went in thinking that this book was going to be one thing, and it ended up being something very different than what we expected. I think in one sense, Rob, you are right that in many ways, maybe he wrote this book because he wrote this book to, we'll say, justify or explain or rationalize the choices and the decisions that he's made in his life. But isn't that what philosophy is? That's what you're doing. You are taking these different lessons, these different teachings from these various philosophies. And that's exactly what we're being challenged to do, is how can I apply this in my own life? Where am I drawing my lines? Where am I saying the moral opportunity cost is enough? And how am I justifying it or not? What I really, yes, his examples often negates the teaching that he is doing, because he's like, this thing, bad. This other thing that I did, well, it's okay. And it's okay because I've rationalized it through X, Y, and Z. We'll get into that more in a moment, especially some much more extreme ones. But ultimately what he's trying to do is force you to think about it, to give you the introduction to some of these concepts, some of these ideas, and force you to reflect. He even talks about it with specifically this first chapter, the moral opportunity cost. He mentions Peter Singer, utilitarian, superstar, I guess, Peter Singer, who basically says, you only need so much stuff. You only need so many, so much food, so much shelter, so much clothing. Anything above that, you should give away. In fact, you have 2 kidneys. You don't need both kidneys. You should just give one away, what they call effective altruism. You should just be giving it away, because what do you need it for? And that's where he criticized, for example, Bill Gates, because even though Bill Gates has donated $30-something billion to charity, to Peter Singer, that's not enough. He should be doing more because he's able to do more. And that's really, I think, that was what I took away, at least from this first chapter, when it came to that moral opportunity cost. Everyone is going to draw their own line. For some people, I think about you, Sierra, and you and your husband, Chris, and Colt, you have adopted very much a minimalist lifestyle to a point. You've recognized, this is our line, this is our threshold of what we need, but we also add a buffer for the things that we want. Sometimes those wants are things, but a lot of times those wants are experiences. And anything above that, for now, we're saving for the future, for our child's future, for our future. But, eventually over time, that extra, that excess will go towards people who might need it more. And I think that's really what he's trying to do, is just be a little bit more mindful before you throw down that credit card, God forbid, and accrue more debt. Throw down that credit card or take out that money and spend it on whatever that thing is that you want. Pause and say, is this something I really want? Is this something I really need? And it can be a want. It's okay. Like Marie Kondo says, did it spark joy? Then do it. Get it. Keep it. It's not that there's, oh no, this is not a necessity, so I can't buy it because it doesn't fit this threshold. It's just more saying, just pause and ask yourself, could this money be used for some other purpose, maybe outside of myself and my needs or my satisfaction?
Well, and as far as his writing style, I think one of the writing styles he's trying to employ is he's trying to take these philosophical ideas and the many takes that schools of philosophy have, and then apply it to an example. You know, we see this in a lot of ancient texts where there's an example and they're trying to teach you a lesson by playing out the example. So are some of the examples in this book well chosen? I would say not always. I would say reminds me a little bit of those word problems where I want to go in and cross out all the information I didn't need to get to the point, right? But he's trying to teach us via an example of how this is applying these different ideas. I think we get really lost in the woods, though. There were so many times where I even had a moment in the last section where he was talking about banking, as far as like banking your good and bad points. And then all of a sudden he changed over to like a physical financial bank. And I was like, well, I don't even remember what your point was. I'm so lost. But he does say, well, this is kind of what philosophy books are. You do get really lost. So maybe it was intentional.
Yeah.
I would question the impact that he thinks certain people can make. And I think that that is also one of the misnomers. So he's incredibly judgmental of Jeff Bezos. Now you have to understand, Jeff Bezos is like the second wealthiest guy on the planet, like $250 billion, let's call it. Michael Schur is no slouch when it comes to net worth, I'm sure. I don't know offhand what his net worth is, but typically Hollywood writers that have 2 or 3 or 4 good shows have a few $1 million to play with. So that's where I also find that judgment very interesting. A rich guy judging another rich guy, a rich white guy judging another rich white guy, saying he should do more. Well, okay, let's think about what Jeff Bezos has done. He has created hundreds of thousands, probably millions of jobs from streamlined process. We, as the Painted Porch, could create a product, sell it on Amazon around the world very easily. Like that's incredible. That is an incredibly way to uplift people. Oh, you can say it doesn't pay people, not whatever. That's also a judgment call because you don't have to do that job. So, and then what if you took all of Jeff Bezos's money, all $250 billion of it? In the United States of America, to bring back to politics, the government would spend that in a day. So how much impact could $250 billion truly have? And I'll get political too. And again, this is what I do for a living. I'm a political talk show host. So this is right in my alley. And I think that that's where his examples just fell short. They weren't deep. So let's go back to Bezos. The United States government over the course of 2 years of COVID spent $12 trillion. Still have COVID. Didn't really change the nature of things. So I think the impact he thinks Bezos could make if he gave all away his money is not as big as he might think. So when you put it in that context, this is why I remember the political debates in this book more so than the philosophy. Yeah. And I think going back to being a communicator, so is he a good person? I don't know, because he's very judgmental, and we all are.
Right.
But if you don't have anyone to challenge your thoughts about certain things, if you live in such a bubble where, oh, look at me, I drive a Prius, I drive an electric car now. Oh, I am a vegan or vegetarian, as he makes all of these points to virtue signal as to how good of a person he is. That to me takes away from how good of a person he might be, because he's almost showing off. Yet this whole book is based on shame and how he publicly shamed someone after his then fiance bumped into that person, and that person just wanted his bumper fixed and he didn't want to pay for it. Mm-hmm. So it's just a very interesting way that this parallel goes, that I give him credit for putting himself out there. And I bet he probably is a good person. He seems like it. Amy and I listened to an interview that he did, and I would love to talk to him. Like, I would have no problem with that. But I don't know that he would want to be challenged, because it doesn't seem like he pushes himself except to justify, yeah, I didn't want to pay that guy's bumper. And I did buy the $800 baseball bat for my 5-year-old son. And I took my 5-year-old son to a World Series clinching game in Los Angeles, and I spent too much money on the tickets. That, I think, is the super interesting part, to go back to your point, Amy, that philosophy is, I'm just going to justify my behavior. And I'm going to tell you that I'm a good person. But what does that even mean?
Well, I don't think he's trying to actually say he's a good person. That's why this is very tongue in cheek. The cover is specifically the T's over here, the correct answer to every moral question. I think in many ways what he's doing is showing all the ways that he is not perfect or is struggling to be a good person, and presenting them through different lessons that he's gone through in his life, so that we can all recognize that as long as you're taking the time to understand and to think and to ask yourself those first 4 questions, what am I doing? Why am I doing it? Can I be doing something else, or can I be doing something better? I think those were the 4. I may miss.
But he doesn't necessarily, he said he does. He doesn't even necessarily say, so instead of the $800 bat, oh, I gave $800 to charity too. So I think that.
Yeah, but he's not saying that the only way to be good is if you always choose charity.
Unless you're Jeff Bezos.
Well, yes, okay, and that's part of the where we, I think as a group, even though we're all very different personalities, different stances on things, different beliefs and whatnot, I think even still there were things that bristled us because we could see often the contradictions. And he even calls that out though in the book, where the next chapter gets a little more tricky, which is, can you support people or things that maybe you determine as bad? Can you separate the artist from the art, basically? Or can you separate the CEO's statements from the chicken sandwich, which was one example that he gave. And he on one hand says, Dan Cathy, Chick-fil-A, horrible person because he spoke out against gay marriage, and I'm never eating a Chick-fil-A sandwich. But Woody Allen, he's okay.
And he's never eaten a chicken sandwich from Chick-fil-A.
Yeah.
Because he's a vegetarian, so is your opinion really even relevant on the issue?
Well, but that's where,
like, he's, again, guys, this is what I default to. He's a comedy writer.
yes.
And you've watched any of his shows, you can almost like hear them saying it as a bit. I mean, I think a lot of this, I think we're taking it really seriously. Like you said, we kind of went in on one pretense of what the book was going to be. We're trying to like glean all these cool philosophical ideas. And I think a lot of times he's just trying to be funny.
Yeah.
I mean, a comedy writer tries to be funny. Does a comedy writer go for perfect facts or go for a well-rounded, non-biased opinion? No, they go for the laugh. They go for the gag. I think he's trying to go for the gag. And maybe we're just reading too much into it. And maybe we're supposed to kind of laugh. I think what's really interesting is the book completely takes a change in the last couple pages. He's gone through all these things we're all bristly about, this and that, and all these things, and I'm trying to be funny, yada, yada. And then the last section, it's like a letter to his 2 kids. 10 and 12, I think they are at the time of the publishing of this book. This book just recently came out. And now all of a sudden, that to me, that was the most human of the writing that there was in this book. Because he all of a sudden, you see this warmth and you see this down to earth, and he just all of a sudden boils it down. Like, hey, just, try to be a good person and say so you're sorry when you screw up. And I'm thinking, man, I wish that dude would have showed up for the rest of the book. I would have enjoyed the book more if it was from that angle instead of the make me laugh, make me, I was like, I like that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But I almost had to like look and see if it was an afterword written by somebody else. I'm like, who wrote this part?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I completely agree. Both of us, we said that I liked. That was a wonderful summary of, I think, the message he was trying to get across. throughout the book, but kept struggling to achieve because of, I think you're right, Sierra, because of his desire to provide us some examples, but those examples were often contradictory to one another in what he believed was okay, or it's not so bad, versus something else that he clearly did not support or believe in.
Well,
so I agree.
I think I'm left with the impression, and I'm not sure if this was his intent, that he has a view, Michael Schur does, the author of How to Be Perfect, whether his view of a good person is a certain thing. And that's the parameter that I got the impression that if you don't believe what I believe, you might not be a good person. If you don't believe that Jeff Bezos should give away all of his wealth or should do more, whatever that actually means, you aren't as good a person as he is. Or if you don't, want to stop eating meat because it pollutes the planet or whatever. And I'm like, oh, okay. That's where again, it gets back to that judgment for me. And as the communicator, and if you're working on a team like we do here, you have to be open to other points of view, and you have to listen to them, and you have to understand that not everybody agrees with you on everything. And there are so many different nuances and complexities that what is the idea of being a good person? It, to me, is trying not to harm other people, trying to do as little harm as possible to the planet, and trying to get along collectively. Because that's the philosophy I like the most in this book is the Ubuntu. Is that how you say it?
Mm-hmm.
That's that collectivism of humanity, which is a Stoic belief, which is what we're based on here, which he doesn't really get into, the Stoic beliefs, as we discussed in the other two videos. But that collectivism of we're all in this together, and we're all here because of our ancestors. So we have to try to forward it in the best possible way. Getting involved in political debate sometimes is not the best way forward, particularly if we're going to be judgmental of someone who has a different opinion about us over something we can't control anyways. Because you bring up the gay marriage issue. What is the Chick-fil-A CEO really going to do about gay marriage? It's already legal. It's already here. It's just an opinion.
Mm-hmm.
And is it okay that he has that opinion? I guess so. I can't change his opinion. I don't agree with that opinion. So, but to me, it's not even worth discussing that because it's already legal. It's been established by the Constitution, and nothing's going to change that now. So, instead of trying to plant this flag about, ooh, look at me, I support gay rights. Most people in America now support gay rights. That means you're in agreement with most people. So what if we eat a chicken sandwich from Chick-fil-A? Like, does that really matter? Especially if you don't eat the chicken sandwich to begin with, because now you're just showboating.
Right.
And that's I think what took away from the philosophical lessons to me was the virtue signaling and the showboating about how open-minded he is, while proving that he's not really that open-minded to me.
It's a gotcha right there.
No, but that's I mean, and that's just a qualm of being a human being to me, because we have to understand that we're all some way contradictory. Mm-hmm. We all have contradictory beliefs. The Woody Allen example that he used, he says that his upbringing and his ascent to be a comedy writer came through Woody Allen. And Woody Allen married his stepdaughter. Kind of weird, kind of creepy. But we like Midnight in Paris, a Woody Allen movie. It's a good movie. Should we not watch that? And he makes the case that I'm not going to go to Chick-fil-A, but I'm going to keep watching Woody Allen movies. So that's the contradiction. That does make him human, but I would just caution as a communicator, don't judge someone for still going to get a Chick-fil-A sandwich because they like the Chick-fil-A the same way you might like the Woody Allen movies.
Mm-hmm. Yes, we all have our own line that we have to draw. You have to draw a line at some point. You just have to decide what that line is, but recognize that as soon as you draw that line, you're going to violate your own line that you drew. And again, all of this goes back to awareness and recognition. I think awareness of what am I doing? Why am I doing it? Could I be doing something better, and why? Right? It having that awareness. And he even says, and we talked about it right at the beginning of this, it's to fail, try again, fail better. Just keep. It's not meant to be a checklist of, yep, I've done all these things, I'm a good person. It's, oh, you know what? I'm actually really struggling with this. Let me check back in with myself. Let me see, does this feel right? Is this really the best option? Whether or not it is above or below your line. I think that's the key. But you bring up a great point, Rob, because I do want to talk about it from the perspectives of the Porch team here. You bring up a good point when you talk about communication and how you are communicating with other people, especially people that you don't agree with. So I want to get just a little bit of your perspective on, from a communicator's standpoint, how can you continue to check yourself, identify maybe opportunities where you can validate an idea or an opinion with someone who you don't agree with or who doesn't agree with you. How can you approach that in a way that is more perfect?
Okay, I'll give you an example. So you go to the gym, you work out, you have resistance, right? You're trying to build your muscles, you're trying to run faster, you're trying to row harder. You got to push past the discomfort in your body to get stronger. It's the same thing as a communicator. You got to talk to friends, people you know, about things you disagree with. So, and I'll tie in Sierra's course, Radical Mindfulness, which he teaches us is every time you get bristled, that's an opportunity. That's an opportunity to learn about yourself. But the only way you do that is by going to the gym, by saying, hey, I got to push myself in my communication aspect. I have to find out what bristles me. I have to see what challenges my mind and figure out why it bothers me. And then you go, okay, now I'm aware of my judgments. Now I'm aware of my biases. So now maybe I can communicate past those biases. And here's a good way to do it. Ask and listen. So ask a ton of questions. Really listen to the answers. See what you feel what you feel, and go, ooh, that's interesting. Okay. And then go to paintedporchstrategies.com, purchase the Radical Mindfulness course, and you can learn more about that. And then with the Master Your Message program, you can learn how to incorporate all of those things. So I don't care that Michael Schur has different beliefs than me. What I do care about is the perceived judgment that I get from him, that if I have different beliefs, or Amy has different beliefs, or Sierra has different beliefs. So if I were to talk to Michael Schur, I would ask him a ton of questions and I would listen to his answers. And then we would maybe discuss.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's great, because he does talk about in here how if there is something that you feel truly is wrong, someone is doing something that you perceive as wrong, and you believe that you can have an influence to maybe change that. You know, he talks about Aunt Connie, and Aunt Connie, who's maybe says some slightly racist remarks about Mexicans every once in a while. And so he says, it's okay that you can have two, what seems like opposing beliefs at one time. I love this person, or I love this thing, but it's also problematic. And you can recognize that. But if you start with number one, I love this person, you're going to approach that conversation differently. He doesn't really get into what that conversation might look like. He says, pull Aunt Connie aside and maybe tell her how her statements are, try to convince her that her statements are wrong. And from a communication standpoint, don't do that.
do not judge that person right away.
Don't shame Aunt Connie.
It's not a good idea. Don't do what Michael Schur did to find the basis of this book. Go online and create a campaign because your wife hit someone and you didn't want to pay the bill. Don't do that.
Right.
That never works. It's not a good communication strategy. We already have enough of that in our social media political world. I did not mean to cut you off, but.
No, it's fine. Because I was just saying, from that communicator standpoint, back to what you said, Rob, it starts by being curious. If you're going into that conversation with your proverbial Aunt Connie and you're going in to wag your finger at her and tell her all the ways she's wrong about what she's saying, and, how Mexicans have been,
He doesn't
slurred and
he doesn't
whatever
even give an
for,
example. He
you know,
just
and all of the
generically.
atrocities that they've been through. So you shouldn't say things like that. That is not going to be a good conversation. If you go into the conversation to maybe understand a little bit of where that's coming from with Aunt Connie, ask her questions, like you said, ask and listen. Don't listen so you can retort, listen so you can learn and understand. And then maybe through that, through taking the time, doing a little bit of preparation, you can then come back and have a conversation with Aunt Connie that maybe gives her a different perspective, helps her think about it differently, but you're not shaming Aunt Connie, for God's sakes.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and I'll put on my mindfulness Sherpa hat, which is going to sound a little bit like free to be you and me. But, you know, part of mindfulness is knowing yourself. And it's even, he talks about it in the closing of this, know thyself, right? Is you can know yourself and you can know where your line is and you can act within those parameters. But is there any reason why we need to Aunt Connie to agree with us? Why we need to everybody to think like us, that group think? I mean, I will say even just this team of three, the three of us, there are lots of issues that we have sometimes three different opinions on. We do not need to all agree. I do not need to force Amy to watch Emily in Paris, which is a show that, but if it's not for her, it's not for her. Or, you know, we have an ongoing debate about Rachel Berry from Glee. I love Rachel Berry. She is super irritated by Rachel Berry. But you know what? I don't need to convince Amy that Rachel Berry is awesome. I can be cool with the fact that we can have different opinions. And you know what? Maybe just don't get into Rachel Berry at Thanksgiving. You know, just change the subject, focus on the positive. I mean, it's some of these issues I think are literally making you know, an ant hill into a mountain. I get it, yeah. But also we don't know the point of Aunt Connie, you don't know why she's so irritated by Mexicans. You don't know the story. So listen, maybe you will not agree with her, but maybe once you understand and have that awareness, okay, cool, all right. Agree to disagree.
Understand that we all operate on a selfish level to a certain degree. That is what I think is the ultimate push in philosophy. To go to your points here, to know thyself. The more you understand yourself, the more you realize your reactions are your own. And you think you're right, and you want everybody else to agree with you because you think you're right. That's impossible. That's like expecting Jeff Bezos to save the world. Mm-hmm. It's not going to happen because he's not that rich, you know? So it's that understanding that you operate for yourself and your beliefs. Almost all the time. It's getting outside of those beliefs and understanding that, okay, maybe I'm not right about everything. In fact, maybe I'm right about nothing. Because what do we know collectively? A little bit. We know we've done a pretty good job as humans, but what do we not know? A ton. Mm-hmm. So if Aunt Connie has an opinion about Mexicans, again, just like the Chick-fil-A CEO, how impactful is that? So if she has a direct influence over maybe hiring and firing people at a job, okay, that's a bigger issue than she's retired and she hangs out with her girlfriends and goes to drinks and talks politics. It's just different, right? You could make a case that maybe she's voting for candidates that are going to have policies that are racist or something along those lines. But even still, that's getting a bit of a stretch, assuming you can somehow change her mind. But the only way you can influence her is not by judging her. Right. That's the reality of it. And that selfishness, again, it's not bad. It's just real. So I'm trying not to label things good and bad anymore, because who am I to judge what's good and bad based on someone else's circumstances and what their beliefs are? It's understanding. I'm not great at it, but I at least have that acceptance of myself, mm-hmm. that I do act selfishly when it comes to my opinions. So in trying to be a better person and a better communicator, understanding that allows me to be more open-minded to the Rachel Berry debate in Glee and which side you guys are on.
I am not on Team Rachel.
Team Finn.
I'm curious from your take, now that we've gone through this book, How to Be Perfect, what were some of your key takeaways from a team perspective?
Well, it ties a lot into what Rob was just saying, that yes, by nature, we are selfish. We are thinking of ourselves and our own survival first, but we also are part of a larger team. However broad that circle is, the Stoics talk about the idea of the Cosmopolis and how we are basically all part of one universal team called humanity. But we are all part of some teams in our life. And because we are part of various teams in our life, it is almost impossible to expect every person on that team to share your 100% same worldview. And so it's through that recognition that in order to operate in a healthy team, you have to be willing to have healthy conversations and also to be mindful of the fact that everybody has gone through their own journey in life, and being able to check yourself before you either wreck yourself or you wreck your team. Because just like with Aunt Connie is part of your family team. Do you really is it worth it to completely implode your family team just so you can make Aunt Connie feel bad and make yourself feel good or be seen as right? I think that's one thing that a lot of people overlook, that it's, especially when it comes to a team, it's not always who has the best idea or who is even communicating it the best way, but it's how you're able to collectively come to a decision and make sure that everyone is seen, everyone is heard, everyone is acknowledged, and it's not all about you. Because sorry to tell you, but you do need other people to actually flourish, going back to what we talked about right at the beginning, to have a flourishing life. A flourishing life is not you sitting in your house and shit posting on Twitter for the next 50 years. You're not gonna, that's not gonna be a very healthy relationship, either for yourself or for the potential other people that you have in your life. So that would be my final take.
Love that.
On teamwork. We're all part of the team, and that team is going to have diverse thoughts and diverse opinions, and it's being able to hear and see and recognize and acknowledge. You don't have to agree, but
and again, like the good person, don't judge your teammates based on your point of view, and if they disagree, they're bad people. Or especially when it comes to complex issues like Chick-fil-A chicken sandwiches or Rachel Berry in Glee or whatever else.
I feel like they're very degrees.
Yeah, well, but I mean, but ultimately, unless you have undue influence over some issue, right? Unless you're maybe a politician that can write laws, or you're volunteering on that person's campaign or giving that person money, that politician, the higher up you go, yes, the more influential those opinions are. But if we're just having a discussion, it's just an opinion. Mm-hmm. And he even talks about, Michael Schur does, the Chick-fil-A debate and how he debated it with his writing team. And everybody who seemingly all agrees that gay marriage is good, that disagreements over Chick-fil-A sandwiches.
They had their own lines that they drew, and they drew them at different levels.
Right.
And Michael was expecting all of them to be at his line.
Yep.
But the reality is everyone's going to draw their own personal line. It all comes back to what we're trying to achieve with this book, or with philosophy, or what we pursue with Stoicism, is how can I be the best version of myself for me, but also so that way I am being a good team member for all of those various teams in my life, in my work, in my community, in my cosmopolis.
Right.
So I think for me, beliefs are hugely important. Your emotional attachments to those beliefs influence you. And then it's based on your decisions that you make with those beliefs and those emotional attachments. But you have an opportunity to learn and accept. Because I think ultimately that's that Ubuntu principle, is that acceptance that we are all a team, whether we like it or not, whether we vote for the same people or not, whether we like Chick-fil-A sandwiches or not, or Glee or whatever. that I think is where I'm trying to grow, because I think that to me is how you become a better person.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And give yourself and recognize that you're learning. It's a journey. You know,
Right.
it's a constant practice, as you like to say, Sierra. It is
Yes.
a practice, which means you have to keep working at it. You're going to make trip ups. You're going to slip up. You're going to go, ooh, I was not my best self today. That maybe shouldn't have said it that way. But it's being able to sense that, to recognize those triggers, like you talk about, Sierra. Recognize what's happening. Ooh, why did that feel weird? How can I work through that? How can I shake it out? How can I gain a different perspective? How can I turn what feels like a pebble in my shoe, or an annoying piece of sand? How can I turn that into something that's a pearl of wisdom?
Right. And I think that for me, even though there were aspects of the book I didn't enjoy or I didn't feel were executed well, is that there is a little nugget of that growth mindset. Perhaps you're being introduced to some new ideas that you weren't familiar with. Maybe you'd never really known what existentialist meant. Maybe you didn't know some of these different concepts are about Kant. And maybe it's just giving you that little like shine a light. Let's shine a light. Oh, what is, I don't know what that is, or what the heck are they talking about? What does that mean to me? How do I take in that information? One of my teachers, Dave Oliver, said, anytime there's pain is information. So when you get that like, what? Or I totally don't agree with that. That's information telling you that maybe you need to, like, when you have a second, Google it and think about it, or have a conversation, because these are just words. And I think the word that he chose, how to be perfect, it's sort of like, like he's a comedy writer. Haters gonna hate, comedy writer's gonna make a joke. Like, the joke is, who is perfect? There is no such thing. But if you're always being aware, and if you're always striving and growing, then that intention is there. You're trying to do better.
And through either what he has shown you here, or through whatever you follow, if it's a particular religion, if it's a spiritual practice, if it's a philosophy, if it's Stoicism, we're just going to do a little, push, shout out for Stoicism. It's ultimately what you talk about a lot, Sierra, in Radical Mindfulness. It's just creating a toolbox. And so you have the set of tools, you grab the tool that feels the most helpful or relevant for that situation, but you have a whole toolbox that's at your availability for you to use to help you, again, continue to challenge yourself, but challenge yourself in ways that will help you grow, help you thrive, and help you flourish.
Understand your judgments. They're automatic. They come right to us. It's a survival instinct, literally, but we don't need them the same way we needed them 20,000 years ago. So that's why you can push past them. It's uncomfortable, it really is, but it's so rewarding to do so. And I think that's that next step. I will give Michael Schur at least a little bit of credit, because, well, he did get me to think about things, right? But I thought more about the political points that he was trying to make, but that's my default. That's what I like to do. So there's certain things that I could go in depth on, and maybe we will at some other point. But all in all, would I say the book was worth reading? For me, digging into the politics was, but like I said, I won't remember the philosophy in it and what is what. So I don't know if that's just my interpretation of it, whether I'm going to remember existentialism or who the people he's talking about in there were or not. But there are certain things that I will remember and think about and continue to think about. And I think that is the essence of philosophy, is that constant thinking about the complexities of life and the complexities of every single issue, which our brains, again, program us to have simple solutions.
Well, good news, Rob, is there's no test. There's no test on like which philosophers did what. But when we do these book clubs, I think one of the things that we're really trying to do is like, we step outside of choices that maybe we would have made. We take turns choosing the book every month, so there's a rotation. And it's going to kind of take you out of something that maybe you wouldn't have chosen or you wouldn't have read, or maybe if you weren't having to report to the book club, you would have put the book down, right? It's like we're forcing ourselves to become uncomfortable so that we can learn, so that we can grow. And I always learn a lot, whether I like something, whether I don't like something, because it's like opened up a new Pandora's box. So I guess my thing would say is don't always stay comfortable, is go on that journey and just like see what happens.
Well said. I love it.
So what's next? What's our next book? Do we know? Have we decided?
We have.
Yes. Our next book is it's a selection of mine. Hang on, I have it in the drawer right next to me. Okay. So our book for next month is called The Four Agreements. And it's not a very long book. It's a little book. And it's written by Don Miguel Ruiz. This book has been out for several years now. Some of you may have read it. But if you've already read it, I definitely recommend you reread it, because every time you read a book at a different season of your life, you're going to get a new perspective.
And that's the beauty of what we're doing as well, is sometimes we choose books that are not necessarily directly aligned, or what you would think are directly aligned to what we teach on the Painted Porch. It's not about stoicism. It's not directly about how to talk better, how to communicate effectively.
How to talk good.
It's not about meditation and mindfulness and movement and checking in with yourself. And it's not always about teamwork, but every book that we've read has some real world applicable tie-in. So I love that we're able to gain perspectives on what we know, but also new things that we can learn and then bring back onto the porch and can incorporate into how we teach, how we present, how we engage, how we work with teams and individuals in the future. So that's what I love about the book club too. It's not always what you expect, but we always learn something new, to your point, Sierra, when we do it. So we thank you so much for joining us for How to Be Perfect. Newsflash, we're all working at it. You're doing a great job. Just make sure you're checking in with yourself every once in a while. We would love to hear your thoughts and feedback and comments on the book itself, anything that maybe was a key takeaway for you, something that maybe bristled you a little bit, but also maybe through that bristling, if there was a little lesson there that you gained that you can then take forward on your journey to eudaimonia, to flourishing. So again, once again, we are Painted Porch Strategies. We're so thankful that you're here to join us. If you want to join in on the conversation, click on the link below to join our book club community, and we'll keep doing this month over month. And we hope that you'll be there to join us and share what you learn along with us on the porch.